All right. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome. So, first, I just want to thank you for taking the time out to be here tonight. You could have been anywhere on this Wednesday, but you chose to be here first, which is the first act of liberating yourself, right? Choosing yourself first. So, this space and this presentation was specifically crafted with you in mind as providers, as childcare um, support and with centered self care. So, our presentation is called Self Care Practices for Providers. And here tonight, you'll be reclaiming your well being. So, as providers, you pour so much into others. Tonight is the night you will take note and recenter yourselves on how to pour into you. Okay. So, we're reclaiming our well being. So, a little bit about myself. My name is Rashida Jones. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm a therapist. I'm a mental health advocate. I'm an author. But ultimately, I am here to ensure that well being is the forefront of who you are as a provider, right? I'm not a provider, but I do know what it's like to support a provider. Historically, my aunt, um, when I was 7, she had a daycare for over 20 years and it operated 24/7. There were always children in and out of our home. And I seen how much passion she had as a provider. I seen how much love she poured into the children. I seen in the way that she showed up, in the way that she educated them, in the way that she taught them. I seen how her home and how these children had turned into our family, right? But one thing that stood out to me, as much as she poured into the family and in the community to build these children up, she gave very little time to herself. And that is one thing that I do remember. So, this presentation is a gentle reminder of you pouring into yourself first. So, tonight, we'll explore together. You'll reflect on your well being journey to recognize burnout and to reclaim your energy. Tonight, we'll also explore practical and liberating self care practices that promotes balance, rest, and renewal. And then, lastly, together, we'll create a personal intention for self care as an act for empowerment and preservation. So, tonight, we're reclaiming a personal act of empowerment and preservation as child care providers. Now, before we get started, in old fashion, I want us to take a minute to ground ourselves by simply pausing and breathing. So, wherever you are, I want to invite you to get comfortable, plant your feet on the ground, relax in your chair or on your couch, or even if you're driving, right? Just relax. If you're driving, please don't soften your gaze. But if you are in a comfortable position that is safe, I invite you to soften your gaze and just pay attention to your body. We've been moving around all day, and so now is the time to reclaim our breathing through centering. Inviting you to inhale through your nose, exhale through your mouth, inhale again through your nose, exhale. One more time, breathe in and breathe out. So, in spaces, whether you're at home, you're at work, breathing is a pure form of centering yourself no matter what's going on. It allows your nervous system to be at calm and to be at peace. And so, throughout this presentation, I understand that life is still happening. So, I just want to encourage you all to breathe um, throughout the presentation. So, here's a quote that's going to guide our work tonight. Caring for myself is not self indulgence, it is self preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. So I want you to take some seconds. What does this quote mean to you? Caring for myself is not self indulgence, it is self preservation. and that is an act of political warfare. So many, for many of us as providers, that means our rest, our boundaries, and our healing is necessary in order to preserve ourselves again as providers, as caretakers. Our boundaries are necessary, our rest is necessary, and our healing is necessary. All right, now let's check in. So, this is an icebreaker that's going to guide our work tonight through connection. So, in the chat, I want to ask you, what is one thing that you like to do for self-care, and or what is your go-to song that lifts your mood? So we're going to open up the chat. What is one thing you like to do for self-care, or what is your go-to song that lifts your mood? Okay, go to the movies, sleep, rest, bowling. All right. Work out, walk my dog. Okay, exercise, relax. Yes, yes. Relax, walk. Yes. Massage, all of those things. Yes. And again, self-care looks very different for everyone. Self-care is ultimately, what do you do? What do you like to do that reclaims your time and restores your energy? So just keep that in mind. If you see other things in the chat that you're feeling called to do and you want to add them to your toolbox, I encourage you to write it down, take a screenshot of it, add that to your toolbox as what you can do for self care. I know for me, I like walks. I'm here in California, so there's a lot of trails that are here. Listening to music, right? I have a playlist that's only encouraging and empowering music to lift the mood. You know, if you play the wrong song on the wrong day, it may take your mood and your energy somewhere else. And the goal is to promote positivity, promote empowerment, and to uplift the mood, just to get a good spirit. So, thank you for checking in, and let's start. All right. So, what is self care? So, oftentimes when people talk about self care, the first thing you may hear is, okay, going to get my hair done, going to get my nails done, my haircut, if there's any, men on the call. Um, and so, those are forms of self care, but that's not what all self care is. Self care is taking intentional actions, all right, very intentional actions to protect and restore your energy, healthy well being, so you can care for yourself and others. All right. So intentional actions to protect and restore your energy so that you can care for yourself and others. So for providers, it's reclaiming your energy so you can keep showing up in the work, so you can keep showing up for the families, so you can keep showing up for the communities with energy, with purpose, with passion, um, and a fresh mindset. We need that energy to do what we do and sustain for the long run. So taking care of yourself first is what how we define self care. Okay. So why must we prioritize self care? You know, we talk about this a lot. There's so many trainings on self care, and some of the information may sound the same. However, there's a different lens. So why must we prioritize self care as providers? All right. So historically, for those on the call, we're natural caretakers. Some of us are grandmas, tias, mothers, uncles, grandpas, but then we're that to the children that we serve day in and day out. Some of us operating 24/7. And so we're conditioned to take care of other people. Not only do we get paid, but it's innate and it's in our nature. It's something that we've been doing for generations and generations. And it's always been expected for the men to be providers and the women to be nurturers, taking care of our communities. So, example, when a mother prepares dinner, she has to go out and buy the dinner. She comes home, she washes the vegetables, she prepares in the kitchen. And then she has to cook the dinner. And then she serves the dinner. and then she cleans up. And then before you know it, if she's not at the table, she's eating last. And so that's a beautiful thing that women are able to do that. However, that cannot sustain long term. And so when we think about our role as childcare providers, you deserve a seat at the table along with everyone else. Um, Woosong, right? And so when it comes to burnout, fatigue, and disconnection, we need you to know and recognize the signs of burnout. And so the stats say that 84% of early childcare providers experience emotional distress. That's feeling sad, um, feeling overwhelmed, feeling exhausted, right? 84% is a very large percent of childcare providers. 78% report feeling stressed. Now, although this is a very rewarding career, it can be stressful. Imagine, your parents not coming on time, or, us being worried about financial responsibilities or if we'll get paid. 78% is reporting burnout. 49% is reporting loneliness. If your world is around providing childcare for children, and sometimes 24/7, 7 days a week, it can become very lonely. So 49%, almost half of childcare providers reported feeling loneliness. Depression, 43% reported experiencing depression. 39% reported experiencing anxiety. 47% report burnout due to high demands and low resources, meaning so many people are reaching out for childcare and needing providers, but there's not always resources available, especially if you live in a community where resources are scarce. And then 26% provide 30 hours of care weekly. So, like I mentioned, there's so many childcare providers that are operating 7 days a week, 24/7. And so, burnout is very real. And this is us putting into perspective. These are real data coming from your peers or even yourself if you've done a survey. So it's just something that I want you to keep in mind when you hear the word burnout. These are some numbers. Okay. So how do we recognize burnout in childcare? So just to define burnout is a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by stress, most often from work or for other areas for caregivers. So burnout can show up emotionally. And again, as before mentioned, feeling drained, frustrated, or unappreciated, underpaid, right? Physical burnout can be fatigue if you're like always feeling tired, if you're experiencing headaches, trouble falling asleep, or feeling like you need to sleep way too much, or even body aches from the lack of movement or too much movement, right? Mental, difficulty concentrating. If you have loss of energy or passion, rather, right? I'm just not passionate. I know that I need to show up for my families and the children that I serve, but you're losing the passion or even enthusiasm. It is not exciting as it once was. And then behavior. This shows up often, avoiding tasks. I'll do the dishes later, I'll do the paperwork later, or not doing things that bring you joy. So your world is wrapped in providing for children, providing for families, to where you lack doing the things that you once used to do, going skating, going bowling, hanging with your friends. So these are signs that you may be experiencing burnout. And if you are, now is the time that can bring in awareness, right? Nothing is wrong with being burnt out. Is what happens when you don't acknowledge the burnout. What happens when there's a plan not put in place? It will show up in your work performance. It will show up in the way that you talk to children, in the way that you approach families. If you're the owner of your childcare, right, it will show up in the way that you treat your employees. And so recognizing burnout is very important, and having a level of self awareness is the key. Having a level of self awareness is essential. And all awareness means is I'm noticing my body, I'm noticing how I'm feeling emotionally, I notice how I'm physically. I notice that I am having a loss of energy. And then you're saying, hey, I need attention. I need to give attention to myself, to whatever it is that I may be experiencing at this time. Okay. So we have a quote here about self care, and it just speaks to some of the things that's already been said or some of the things that will be said. Self care is a deliberate choice to give yourself with people, places, things, events, and opportunities that recharge our personal battery and promote whole health, mind, body, and spirit. So when we think of self care, again, how am I addressing my body? How am I addressing my mind? What am I doing to address my spirit to feel whole? So we're thinking of our whole self. We don't just want to address one part of our needs. We want to address our whole selves because our whole selves is how we want to show up in the work. Again, most of you are already doing it. And if you are, that's a beautiful thing. Some of us just need gentle reminders. All right. So here are some of the benefits of self care, restoring your energy. Self care restores the energy that you once had, or it maintains it. It protects your time and boundaries. In this work, again, I keep hearing a lot of my providers say they operate 24/7, 7 days a week. So when you have self care and a good self care routine, it protects your time and it protects the boundaries you have for yourself and the company that you're running or the daycare you're running, right? The benefits of self care is also supporting emotional balance. Again, because we mentioned burnout, it's important that we support our emotional needs. What do I need for myself? How can I show up for myself so I can continue to show up for the families that I serve? And then lastly, the benefit of self care is reconnecting you to your purpose. We all are here. There's over 400 people on this call. We all have a purpose. And sometimes we can lose sight of that purpose when we're showing up for everybody else, right? Like sometimes our goals, our vision, our dreams can get lost in what we're doing when we don't stop and smell our own roses. So, a part of the benefits of self care is reconnecting you to your purpose, reconnecting you to your why. Okay. So we've discussed we defined self care, right? And why it's important. We gave a brief overview of the stats of burnout. Now let's talk about practical strategies that, again, some of the things that you may see, you're already doing it, but this is a gentle reminder. So there are six components of self care. You have the physical self care, you have emotional, and I'll talk a little slow if you choose to write it down. You have physical, you have mental, you have emotional, you have your spiritual self care, you have social, and you have professional. So as we go along, again, feel free to write it down. If there's something that comes to mind, write it down. If there's something that you want to explore more, I encourage you to write it down. And like I mentioned, some people may already do it. If you do it, that's a beautiful thing. If not, a gentle reminder. But tonight we're going to make an intentional decision to reclaim and continue to put ourselves first and practice them regularly. So let's start off with physical self care. Um, I intentionally chose this guy here walking his dog because this is one of the easiest forms of physical self care that we can do. Is reconnect your body as a sacred space, reconnecting physically. So your body carries us through our entire day, right? Our body is sacred. So ask yourself when you think of your physical self care, when's the last time have I gone to the dentist? When's the last time I had a physical? When's the last time I had intentional body movements? When's the last time, I went to an eye exam? Physical self care. What are you doing? What have been doing, and what practices do you have in place to address your physical needs? And so some of the ways in which here are practical practices, stretch or mindful breaks. Um, I often say if you don't have enough time, even if you just wake up in the morning and do a stretch from bed, you know, it's still a form of physical self care. Before you get your day started for work, if you carve out just 30 minutes, to walk around the neighborhood, um, if you have YouTube and you can play it on your phone or from the television, um a song and just dance in the mirror, right? Or they have yoga on YouTube, they have Zumba on YouTube. There's so many ways in which we can engage physical self care, not just for now, but again, we're thinking long term. When we think of ourselves and being liberated, we're thinking, what can I do now to sustain me for years to come? So we have stretch and mindful breaks, prioritizing hydration, that is drinking your water. Um, and the water can, I say 3 to 4 bottles of water a day. Some people go by gallons. That's not the axe here. The axe is just for you to maintain hydration. Making sure you have a balanced meal. Are you eating your protein, right? Are you making sure your plates are fruits and vegetables? Are you being intentional with what you put in your body? I know sometimes it's very convenient to pop something in the microwave or to get something on the way home, but just being more intentional with your physical self care. Um, Create a routine before and after work, and schedule sleep. I've met a lot of providers who say, I only got 3 hours of sleep, or I'm not getting any sleep. There's nights where there's no sleep happening. Scheduling sleep is the most critical thing in physical self care. And so these are just some things. If you're doing it, great job. If you're not, something to be mindful of. All right. Emotional self care. And all emotional self care speaks to is honoring your feelings. Um, as providers, you all hold a lot. As educators, you hold a lot. Again, outside of the roles that you carry daily and the many hats that you wear, you're carrying the children's emotions from the youngest to the oldest, right? You're carrying your family emotions and some of the things that they are experiencing. And sometimes they take it out on you. But how are you honoring your feelings? So, some ways in which you can honor your feelings is daily check ins, asking yourself, how am I feeling today? Who poured into me or did I pour into myself? Emotional self care, journaling how your experience has been throughout the day. What were something you proud of? What something you accomplished? How did you feel throughout the day? So, journaling and writing, essential to self care. Setting boundaries. Setting boundaries is always my favorite to talk about with emotional self-care because this role is can be very heavy and rewarding. You have to set boundaries. If I say pickup is at 7, pickup is at 7, right? If I say I cannot watch the children this weekend, you just can't. Setting boundaries within professional and within, your home. What are your boundaries? This is not always easy because we show up in love, and because we are givers naturally, but setting boundaries could sustain you from a lot of the burnout that we talked about earlier on. Practice self compassion. It's going to be days where it's not going to always be, roses. It's not going to always be a good day. But when you show grace and empathy and love for yourself, you're able to model what that looks like for others. Also, one of my favorites is crying and laughing. There's this belief that crying is just for sorrow, but you can cry tears of joy. But if it is heavy, you can also cry and release, which is a good form of emotional self-care. And then laughing. Let's explore room for laughing, whether it's watching something or creating the moments within your family or in your business or with your children to laugh. So these are just some practical ways to show emotional self-care. Okay. Mental. Mental self-care. Our minds. Are we nurturing our minds? Um, and mental health is very important, especially within the communities that we serve in our household, and just wanting to acknowledge mental health in this very moment. And so, how can we model what that looks like through tangible tools? Taking a break, you know, again, we have cell phones, we have the media, we have all that's going on in the world that we want to recognize. There's a lot of worries that's happening within our community. And sometimes we can just take a break. You know what? I'm going to take a mental health day today. I'm going to take a social media break today. I'm going to take my time to just sit in silence and just be. What that looks like for you, it really depends if you're someone who operates a daycare or you're someone who works, but be intentional with taking your breaks. Um, Engaging in something new or creative. When's the last time you did something that was new, that you just wanted to try? Pickleball, yoga, um, going out to a new walk or hike in your neighborhood, trying the new matcha, right? Something new, art, anything that allows you to do something that's out of your norm. And then reflect weekly. Again, what worked well this week? What's something that I want to improve on? Again, for yourself. So taking away what's something you want to improve on for a business, for childcare, but what's something that you want to do mentally for yourself. And then lastly, practicing positive affirmations. It's something that I teach with my students a lot, how to affirm themselves and give themselves their flowers. Simply saying, like, I am great, I am loved, I am worthy. As we teach those to our students, how are we being compassionate with ourselves and sharing them with ourselves? So, positive affirmations. Today is going to be a good day, Rashida. Today, you are more than a conqueror, Rashida. So just practicing those are ways that you can um, practice mental self care. Spiritual self care. All right. So I want to be very intentional with this slide. Spiritual self care is not necessarily tied to religious beliefs. All spiritual self care is returning to purpose, presence, and peace. All right. Returning to purpose, presence, and peace. So, here in the first photo, they're practicing spiritual self care by a way of yoga, right? And then the second one, it's a form of it. I believe she's praying or meditating. And so, whatever your choice is, ensuring that the spiritual part of you, um, if you believe is addressed. So you can also do that as beginning or ending your day with grounding. We started the call with breathing. That's spiritual self-care. Praying, if you believe, you pray. Meditating is when you're just, again, sitting in silence and allowing, time to just sit, reflect, and listen. And then spiritual self-care is gratitude. When's the last time you've expressed gratitude for the families that you served? When is the last time you expressed gratitude for the home that we have, for the food that we have, the resources that we have? Space like this for our Child Care Providers United. Um, when's the last time you showed gratitude? And you can do that through just writing notes of gratitude to yourself or simply saying thank you, right? Spiritual self care is revisiting your why. Everybody came into this work for different reasons, for a different calling. Um, and so go back to what brought you here. Why am I doing the work that I do? Why am I passionate about the families that I'm serving? And what continues to guide this work? And when you revisit your why, it keeps you grounded, and it keeps you inspired to continue. I have this picture down here to volunteer. I do know that because you all work with, families and children, day in and day out, it may not always have time to volunteer, but volunteering your time outside of the work that you already do can be very rewarding with addressing your spiritual self care. So I'm always encouraging, one way or another to give back, in a way that you can, that works for you. All right. So social self care. Community. Community is how we will maintain and the work that we do. So, community is how we'll continue to move forward. And I want you to understand that there's so much power in community. Again, I'm referencing the amount of people that's on this call. This is what community looks like. So, I know this is a virtual space, but whenever you're in community with the people on this call, how can you connect with them that is good for you? How can you build relationships and have networks? Social self care is very important. And when you take off the professional lens, for people outside of this space, what that looks like is spending time with people you trust. If you don't trust the people, they should not be in your space, right? You want to spend time with people who are good for you. Staying connected to like minded individuals. Do you share the same values? Do you share the same morals? Are you getting good energy from the people that you're around? Again, mentioning boundaries, having boundaries in relationships. If you can't go out tonight because you're tired, it is okay. If it's something that you're not interested in and you're feeling like it's a burden to go, it is okay for you not to go. So just setting boundaries within your household personally, within your professional lens, as well. Even setting boundaries with your husband or wives or children, with the families you serve. That is good for your social self care. Joining a support group. Joining a support group outside of this network of people. Is there a book club that you've always wanted to join? A run or walk club, your local church, a gardening club, a chess club. There are so many clubs that can speak to your interests in whatever you want to do. But joining those clubs allows the balance in your life. Again, you all are so much more than just being providers. And so you want to continue to restore and protect your energy by having a good social balance. And then lastly, I always like to encourage people to date their friends. When's the last time you really had a good old time with some of your friends just to talk um, about life and laugh and just be in good company? So when you're thinking of your social self-care, think about building relationships and connections that brings the best out of you. All right. Professional self care. We are all here because this is a part of our profession, professional development, right? Getting tools that you need to continue to be the best childcare provider that you can be. And so, professional self care is honoring yourself within the work. How can you practice honoring yourself while still being a childcare provider? And so, you can honor yourself by taking breaks. Again, we mentioned earlier, taking breaks. Um, if you're working directly with children and families, make sure you have a breakfast break for yourself. Make sure you get your 2 10 minutes and your 30 minutes, and take your breaks or lunch away from, the work. Again, scheduling lunch breaks. If you're the supervisor or the boss or you own the company, how do you model that for your employees? Making sure and encouraging them to take their lunch breaks. Celebrating the small wins in your professional self care. Did your children and families grow? A lot of families are aging out, they go on to school. So, did you receive more families? Did you do something nice, for the families? Whatever that wins look like for you, celebrate it. Have an identity outside of your role. Again, as mentioned, you all are so much more than childcare providers, so much more. And so, who are you outside of what you do? And then, lastly, saying no. Learn to say no. Okay. As providers, we want to help everyone. And I always hear when I do this training, it's so hard to say no. It's so hard. We have to learn. We have to learn to say no. There's so much power in saying no. And you may feel guilty. It's not always the easiest thing to do is to say no, especially if you want to help someone and someone needs help. But if it goes against you and your well being and you just don't have it, it's okay. You know, the old saying is they'll figure it out. If you were not there, people know how to figure it out. And so having the fine balance and showing compassion for the families that you serve, but also honoring, the capacity that you do or don't have. So learning to say no is bold here or in all caps here because we have to learn how to say no. And when you think of saying no, all that comes to is just boundaries. If it's hard for you to say no, you just say, I have to practice my boundaries. I'm implementing my boundaries. I'm putting boundaries in place for my self-care. And so it's okay. Again, it's okay to say no. All right. So that was the 6 forms of self-care. I hope you all took some notes or something stood out for you. Now let's do a knowledge check. So we're going to open up the chat now. And the question is, which of these are signs of burnout? A, constant exhaustion, feeling drained. B, feeling irritable. C, decreased joy in work. Or D, all of the above. So drop your answers in the chat. Yes, 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 yes. You all got it. All of these are signs of burnout. Again, constant exhaustion, feeling drained, feeling irritable, decreased joy in work. All of these are signs of burnout. If you are experiencing these, please seek the help that's out there and that's available. Right? There are resources for caregivers and providers who do experience burnout, and that's by a way of therapy, support groups, hiring additional staff, or just taking a break. Okay. Next question. What are 6 components of self care? What are the 6 components of self care? What are the 6 components of self care? So you'll just drop them in the chat. There are 6, and we talked about all of them. What are the 6 components of self care? Yes, yes. I see some answers: physical, mental, professional, social, emotional, spiritual. Yes, absolutely. Physical, emotional, mental. Yes, you all have it. You all have it. Now, again, you may not always see spiritual, you may not always see professional, but when I think of the whole person and who you are as people, as human beings, we must address all of those components in order to fully be whole. All right. So you all have it, the 6 components there. All right. And then our last question: taking time for yourself is an act of selfishness. Taking time for yourself is an act of selfishness. All right. False. False. Okay. Absolutely not. Yes. Yes. False. False. We're all on the same page here. Yes. Absolutely. Yep. You all have it. Taking time for yourself is not an act of selfishness. And sometimes people don't understand that. Like when you say no or when you say you can't, you know, sometimes it's assumed that it's selfish. And the reality is, it's not, you know? And so taking time for yourself, it's again self preservation. It's how you preserve for the long term. You know, it's liberating. It tells the world when you say, no, I cannot, it tells the world, like, hey, I'm finally putting myself first in order to take care of me. And that shows how important you are to the work that we do if you want to continue to show up your best self. All right. So it will never be selfish. Again, you already know, but this is a gentle reminder. Okay. So now we're going to reclaim self care, and we're going to reclaim self care through a commitment. All right. So, in my practice as an educator, I believe in the power of writing. You know, everybody's not a fan of writing, but there is something that happens when the pen touches the paper or when you're able to express yourself by a way of like your cell phone, right? And so, when we do that, when we affirm ourselves and we write out our thoughts and our feelings, again, it's a very liberating feeling from, personal experience to what communities have shared with me. And so now, because we're virtual, if you have a pen or a piece of paper near, I encourage you to grab a pen and paper. But if you don't, and you just have your phone, whatever you have near, I want to encourage you to grab it. And so, what we're going to do is for the next 3 minutes and 30 seconds, I want you to think about a liberating act of, and when you think of liberation, um, I want you to think of self care. And in this, I want you to write a self affirmation letter to yourself answering, what part of your well being are you reclaiming? So we know that there's 6 components of self care. And so I want you to see, well, what part of those 6 components have I been neglecting? Or what part of those 6 components that I want to pour more love into? And so you're going to write a letter to yourself, um, reclaiming which part you're going to pour into. So maybe it's you connecting more spiritually or getting back to the things you enjoyed. Maybe it's you having more social fun with your fellas or your girlfriends. You know, whatever it is, now is the time to reclaim. So I'm gonna play a song for 3 minutes, um, and I want you to take the time to answer this following question. So the music may not play, but in the event that the music is not playing, we still wanna acknowledge the 3 minutes for you to write and reclaim your self-care commitment.
I am not the things my family did. I am not the voices in my head. I am not the pieces of the brokenness inside. I am light. 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 I'm not the mistakes that I have made, or any of the things that cause me pain. I am not the pieces of the dream I left behind. I am light. 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 I am divinity defined. I am the God on the inside. I am a star, a piece of it all. I am light.
All right. So, as you come back to the space, just wanting to encourage you all to reclaim self care as a commitment, right? So, whatever your letter is to yourself, I want you to reflect on that letter. And I want you to regularly, write a letter to yourself. And this is a commitment for you to hold yourself accountable as to, asking yourself, what am I going to do to reclaim, self care for myself? What am I going to do to put myself first? How can I be more intentional with how I show up for myself physically? How can I be more intentional with how I show up for myself spiritually or socially? How can I make a commitment to myself, not to my job, not to my family, not to the many titles that I wear? What can I do for myself? All right. Can you all still see my slide?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So here's a quote. And before we move on, that was, again, thank you for participating in the writing activity. At any time, just feel free to journal how you feel, celebrating the wins and the things that are not so pretty. Because, like I mentioned, it's not the easiest role to care or take care of, a generation. We are raising a generation. We are building character with the children that we are raising. All right. So we're going to lead into this quote. Anytime we can listen to our true self and give the care it requires, we do it not only for ourselves, but for the many others whose lives we touch. Okay. So sit with that for a second. You just made a commitment to yourself. And I want you to think of it on this quote. Anytime we can listen to our true self and give the care it requires, we do it not only for ourselves, but for the many others whose lives we touch. We wear many hats. And in order to continue to show up for those babies, those parents, um, we owe it to ourselves. We owe it to ourselves to put ourselves first. Again, gentle reminder. Okay. So we briefly reviewed the practices of self-care. Again, not it's not an exhausted list, just because of time, but they were all gentle reminders of what can I do to take care of myself. So self-care practices look different for everyone. We do not all have the same access. We do not have all the same resources. We all live in, maybe rural areas, cities. Just depends on our situations and how our families are set up. So that may look different for everyone. Me going running may look different from someone going walking, you know. And so just keep that in mind. So, again, for some, it can mean staying still, self care. Some people are extremely busy and they never sit down, right? So, for one person, it may mean, just sitting still and being in silence. And for some, um, it can mean being active. Some people are never active, and that's getting more active. But overall, the intention is to engage in an activity that protects and or restores you. So again, self-care is protecting you, the person, and restoring you back to you, what you love, and what you do. Again, if it works, you hold on to it, you adopt it. If it doesn't, you throw it out and you figure out what works for you, because that may look different depending on the day. It may look different depending on the mood. All right. One more quote for you to think of or think about or reflect on. Um, You are not here to pour from an empty cup. So, this is me speaking to you, every 400 and something participants on this call. You're not here to pour from an empty cup. Again, yes, we understand that you're a provider. Yes, we understand that this is your work and you do all the things that encompasses this role, but you are so much more than that. So again, another gentle reminder: when you reclaim your well-being, you remind the world that your peace is not negotiable. Okay. And when you remind the world that your peace is not negotiable, that is liberation in itself. All right. And the point here is to be liberated. You are here to live, to breathe, to be whole for yourself, and what you do, it spills off into the communities you serve. Okay. My last acts, before we take off and you're in the hands of another presenter. I want to invite you to take your right hand and I want you to place it on your heart if you can. And I want you to take your left hand and I want you to place it um, over your stomach. And I want you to repeat after me. And this is our affirmation together. Today, I reclaim my well being, not as a luxury, but as my birthright. Today, I reclaim my well being, not as a luxury, but as my birthright. We'll say it one more time. Today, I reclaim my well being, not as a luxury, but as my birthright. Continue to um, speak life into yourself. Continue to put yourself first. And at any moment, when the world seems, a lot's going on, remember to breathe and to center yourself, and knowing that self care is not a luxury. Okay. That is my presentation, you all. Here is my contact information. Um, this is not a Q&A portion, but if you do have questions, there will be a survey followed with the whole presentation. Um, Please leave questions, comments, suggestions. Um, but this is my contact information if you want to follow up. My website and my email address. And then lastly, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your time. Again, you could have been anywhere on this Wednesday evening, but you chose to be here. And just the fact that you chose to be here is showing that you put yourself first. It's already a liberating act that you chose to stay the entire time and engage and listen to what I was able to provide. So I want to thank you. And I want to remind you as you move through the weeks, the months, and the years to come, please show yourself grace in the process and take care of yourself because you are exactly what the world needs. So thank you all for having me. And I am going to pass it back over to the ladies who are hosting it. You all take care.